Hello and welcome to the presentation of the 108th edition of the Tour de France. The 107th Tour has only just finished, and yet here we are, ready to unveil the route of the 2021 edition. The Tour de France 2020 was a huge success. It was a sporting success because we had thrilling stages every day and a remarkable upset in the general classification on the eve of the finish on the Champs-Élysées. It was a rating success because we had 40 million TV viewers on France Télévisions. It was an organisational success because there were no positive cases within the peloton. And finally, it was a symbolic success because it proved that life can go on in spite of COVID-19 as long as we ensure strict compliance with the necessary preventative measures. Every edition of the Tour de France is a collective success, but this extraordinary edition, with its various challenges, was a particularly spectacular example. We owe this collective success to all the stakeholders who contributed to this accomplishment, and I thank them from the bottom of my heart. Nice, which hosted the Grand Départ, as well as the towns and cities that welcomed the Tour de France. Our public services, prefecture, police and gendarmes, and the various cycling stakeholders, the UCI and professional cycling teams. Finally, the media and partners. This same belief in collective success underpins our launch this year of the Tour de France United project. This project will bring our partnerships with different charity organisations under one umbrella: Secours Populaire, the South African non-profit Quebecer, and Emmaüs. Some of these partnerships go back 10 years, and their aim is to promote cycling among children and the underprivileged. The Tour de France is also committed to the environment. For over a decade, the Tour has been working hard to reduce its footprint. Since 2013, we have identified hundreds of Natura 2000 sites on the roads of the Tour de France. In 2017, we were among the founding members of the WWF Charter that adapts the 17 Sustainable Development Goals of the United Nations to the world of sport. For the first time this year, all of the organisations that Skoda cars in the race convoy were hybrid vehicles, and we continue to reduce plastic use in the publicity caravan. Single-use plastic wrappings are only allowed for foodstuffs. And our partners now hand out eco-friendly and practical goodies. Another of our long-term ambitions is developing women's cycling, which we have been doing for the past 20 years as the leading organiser of women's races. The launch of a stage race in 2022 will add a major event to the calendar and provide a big step forward for women's cycling. In the meantime, before Christian Prudhomme unveils the route of the 2021 edition of the Tour de France, let's now look back on the highlights of this year's race.
Il est en train de perdre le Tour de France, Primož Roglič.
This rider has led the Tour de France with his team for 11 days.
C'est terrible ce qui se passe pour le maillot jaune, que l'on pensait invincible à la tête d'une armada surpuissante, la Jumbo-Visma, eh bien non.
This is incredible. Tadej Pogačar is producing a time trial to take the yellow jersey on the final day. You're watching a moment in history.
Attention, stop, départ réel donné. De que les quick step, il y a eu un incident pour la Philippe, le 41 à la Philippe.
Avec une chute d'un coureur de l'équipe.
C'est Lopez,
c'est Lopez.
Lopez.
was a big crash right on 3 kilometers.
Thibaut Pinot pris dans la chute.
Alexander Kristoff kjører seg rett inn i den gule ledertrøya! Oi, oi, oi!
Le maillot jaune semble en difficulté.
Ouais, il a complètement craqué.
Alaphilippe with a massive attack.
Ça y est, c'est parti, l'attaque de Julien Alaphilippe avec
Marc Hirschi dans la roue.
Julien Alaphilippe qui s'impose.
Merci les gars, merci.
Maillot jaune.
Victoire de Caleb Ewan. La victoire de Primoz Roglic.
Julian Alaphilippe has been given a penalty. Julian Alaphilippe out of the yellow jersey, and Adam Yates, he is now the leader of the Tour de France. Wonderful day for Alexei Lutsenko.
C'est en train de casser, c'est en train de casser.
The race is now going to split.
Pogacar, Mikel Landa dans le deuxième groupe.
Ouais, Tadej Pogacar, troisième du général, attention.
Avance pour le groupe maillot jaune sur le groupe Pogacar. 50 secondes.
Ah, ça creuse rapidement. Hein.
Ouais.
How much time are they going to lose?
Dan Stuyven tegen Van Aert. En wie? Van Aert wint! Ram, bam, bam!
Et Tadej Pogacar qui va perdre 1 minute 21.
Thibaut Pinot, le 51, a été distancé.
C'est terminé.
He's trying to stretch. The back is not good.
Et l'accélération de Nance Peters.
An attack of Tadej Pogacar again.
Il est parvenu à prendre 1 minute dans l'ascension de Peyresourde.
Ouais, mais attention, on le laisse revenir dans le jeu.
Nance Peters wins.
Pour son premier tour, bravo Nance Peters.
Le maillot jaune, Adam Yates, distancé du groupe des favoris.
Pogacar gonna break Tadej Pogacar, Proticilli, Chelsea, Tadej Pogacar jest podolny!
Tadej Pogacar wins the stage.
Quelle finale. Primoz Roglic qui s'empare du maillot jaune.
Wow.
Dans une chute en peloton.
Est-ce que Caleb Ewan va le remonter? Comment pris va Caleb Ewan? Caleb Ewan, Sam Bennett. Et qui est-ce qui s'impose? Je crois que c'est Sam Bennett.
Here goes Sam Bennett. Here goes Caleb Ewan. It's on the line. Who's going to get it? Ooh.
Victoire pour Caleb Ewan.
Et l'accélération de Marc Hirschi qui est reparti.
The hurricane descender from Switzerland, Marc Hirschi.
Elle est encore plus belle après ces deux frustrations.
Nairo Quintana également pris dans la chute. Nairo Quintana et Romain Bardet.
Sale journée pour les deux Français placés au classement général. Guillaume Martin 3e, Romain Bardet 4e. Allez, l'attaque de Lennart Kemna, est-ce que Martinez va pouvoir réagir?
Danny Martinez wins.
Victoria!
Et Pogacar,
Allez, les deux Slovènes
Roglic.
sont partis.
Les deux Slovènes.
Egan Bernal has cracked on the Puy-Marie.
Bernal perd sa deuxième place au général. Deux Slovènes aux deux premières places du classement général du Tour de France.
3 kilometers to go, the pack is a bunch.
Attack of Søren Kragh Andersen. He goes clear now.
Nu er der også etapevinder. Ja. Søren fra Strib har vundet i Lyon. Fantastisk timing, fantastisk power.
Oulala,
Ah ouais, regarde derrière.
Mais oui, qui est venu toucher la roue arrière de Bob Jungels.
Fini l'abandon. L'abandon du 74, Sergio Higuita. 55 secondes de retard pour le groupe Bernal Quintana. 55 secondes.
Et l'addition va être lourde à l'arrivée.
Oui.
Plusieurs minutes, je pense, pour
Il
Bernal.
reste 13 km. Allez, Pogacar qui accélère maintenant. L'attaque de Tadej Pogacar.
Pogacar looking for another stage win at the top of the Grand Colombier.
Journée noire, comme la couleur de son maillot pour Egan Bernal, qui a tout perdu.
Er ist drin, Glückwunsch, Lennart Kemner, größter Erfolg, den Druck auf dem Pedal danach. Super.
No, I don't want to give excuses about my performance, but now I think I'm suffering too much.
De 5 secondes d'avance pour Carapaz, toujours.
Déchaîné, l'Équatorien.
Mikel Landa est en difficulté. C'est Rigoberto Urán, le coureur de IF, distancé.
Qui fait preuve de beaucoup de courage, en tout cas, Benoît Cosnefroy.
Carapaz repris par le groupe maillot jaune.
Lopez qui fait la différence maintenant.
Pogacar is on the absolute limit here. Trying to fight his way back to Primoz Roglic.
La victoire de Miguel Ángel Lopez.
Superman Lopez.
Est-ce que Pogacar va pouvoir doubler Roglic avant la ligne et prendre quelques secondes de bonification? Non, il est au bout, Pogacar. Et l'arrivée de Primoz Roglic qui va faire une excellente opération bien sûr et qui prouve qu'il est bien l'homme fort de ce Tour de France.
Here she... Whoa, that was a big crash.
Deux hommes en tête, deux coureurs de Ineos, de Grenadiers, Carapaz et Kwiatkowski.
La victoire de Michal Kwiatkowski d'une demi-roue devant Richard Carapaz.
Søren Kragh Andersen, 2 etapesejre i Tour de France. Yes.
Victoire à Champagnole de Søren Kragh Andersen.
Time trial. I will go from start to the finish full gas and do my best.
Tadej Pogacar is now underway for the time trial of his life.
À l'instant, le dernier coureur a s'élancé, le premier du classement général, le porteur du maillot jaune LCL, le Slovène Primoz Roglic.
Look at the speed of Tadej Pogacar as he blasts past Miguel Ángel Lopez.
Il voltige là, Pogacar.
This would be the highlight of Richie Porte's career.
Il va aller chercher la 3e place sur le podium, je pense.
Sans aucun doute.
Richie Porte.
Lui qui court après ça depuis un certain moment.
À 35 ans.
This is incredible.
Et attention parce que le maillot jaune de Primoz Roglic est en danger.
Je le rappelle, il avait 57 secondes d'avance sur Pogacar ce matin.
The bike change of Tadej Pogacar, they're getting ready.
Ça doit prendre 10 secondes normalement, pas plus. C'est parti pour l'ascension finale.
Roglic, you can see the stress, you can see the worry in the way he's riding right now.
Il s'arrête finalement, Primoz Roglic.
It's now 12 seconds and now it's 11.
Plus que 10 secondes d'avance pour le maillot jaune. Il est en train de perdre le tour.
This is incredible. Oh, the last time this happened was in 1989 between Laurent Fignon and Greg LeMond.
Mais il fait une montée stratosphérique, Tadej Pogacar, qui va exploser le chrono de Tom Dumoulin.
Meilleur temps pour Pogacar.
Pogacar wins the stage.
Ouais, là, il s'écroule. Roglic, il s'écroule.
Roglic cannot believe it.
Pogacar qui va s'habiller de jaune ce soir, c'est lui, le patron du Tour de France. Oh.
ce jeune prodige.
Breathtaking, absolutely breathtaking.
Terrible, terrible pour Primoz Roglic.
Tadej Pogacar will win the Tour de France by 59 seconds from Primoz Roglic. 59 seconds will be his winning margin.
Du Tour de France 2020 entre à l'instant dans la ville de Paris.
Bennett, the green jersey, wins on the Champs-Élysées.
Tadej Pogacar, a sporting symbol of the upheaval that has marked 2020, the youngest winner of the Tour de France since 1904. At the end of last year's Tour, I spoke about the emergence of a new generation that wants it all and wants it now. In 2019, Egan Bernal became the youngest winner since 1947. Now Pogacar has done even better, while Mark Hirschi was the Tour's most combative rider at 22. The ability to adapt has always been part of organising events, but in 2020 it has been essential. The COVID-19 pandemic shook up the sporting calendar. The Olympics and Euro 2020 were postponed until next year, forcing us to bring the Tour forward by a week. Copenhagen could no longer welcome the Tour in 2021. That will now happen in 2022. And over the summer, we had to find a new Grand Départ for the Tour de France. A huge thank you to Brittany, especially the Regional Council, with the support of Brest, for immediately saying yes to hosting the race in 2021, a year earlier than planned. I've said it before, I'll say it again. Brittany is not, never has been, and never will be a plan B. Brittany is plan A. A for anticipated, a year earlier than planned, and we are extremely grateful. Let's now hear from the President of Brittany's Regional Council, Loïc Chesnay-Girard. Brittany is proud to welcome the Tour de France 2021. In Brest for the Grand Départ, and then to see the race get underway throughout our region. To show off the best of Brittany, our towns, our countryside, our coastlines and our magnificent landscapes. Everything that makes Brittany so appealing, so full of character, a region with cycling in its DNA. I would like to say thank you to the thousands of volunteers who help to run cycling clubs in Brittany, all those who are involved in organising races on weekends throughout the year. This Grand Départ will give the whole of Brittany a chance to celebrate, to share our sublime landscapes with the rest of the world, and not to mention our unique weather, where we can have several seasons in one day. All of that will be part of the success of this Grand Départ 2021.
Tout cela participera à la réussite de ce Grand Départ 21.
The Grand Départ 2021 is all about teamwork. It's about the people who have made this Grand Départ a reality. I'm thinking, of course, about Christian Prudhomme and his teams at ASO, as well as my colleagues, the Mayor and the President of the department, who immediately said yes to Brittany recovering the Grand Départ after Copenhagen was unfortunately forced to postpone. So, we will have a Grand Départ in Brest. The route will head through some of Brittany's most iconic towns: Landerneau, Perros-Guirec, Mur de Bretagne, Lorient, Pontivy, Redon, Fougères, towns that will make their mark on this tour. The Tour will also be an important moment for our economy. After what's likely to be a tough winter, we hope to see spring and summer return, and hopefully our businesses can make the most of this Tour. It will be a new start, a breath of fresh air for our economic activity. Finally, we're looking forward to a Grand Départ with riders from Brittany on the Tour. We hope to see a Brittany-based team grab the yellow jersey early on and keep it with them beyond Brittany.
et l'embarquer avec eux au-delà de la Bretagne. C'est cela que nous espérons. Vive le Tour de France, vive la Bretagne, vive le vélo.
Brittany will provide a stunning backdrop to the first 4 stages of the Tour de France 2021. As for the rest, well, we're going to find out now. Here is the route of the 108th Tour de France. Fast forward to 2021. The summer will just have begun, and on Wednesday, June the 23rd, the teams will set up camp at the tip of Brittany. The team presentation will be held the next day, Thursday, June the 24th, while on Saturday, June the 26th, the peloton will roll out for stage 1. A 7th Grand Départ in Brittany, a 4th in Brest. That's a record for any city except Paris. The start of the tour will be held against a picture-perfect backdrop, but the opening stages will be relentless, with lots of changes in direction and plenty of aggressive riding. We will go through Le Canal, one of the most beautiful villages in France, head down to Quimper, the capital of Cornouailles, before riding back north through the wind-swept zones of the Mont d'Arrée. There'll be no shelter for the peloton, which could end up splitting. And the final is a puncher's paradise with the Côte de la Fosse aux Loups. The foot of the climb is very steep and it leads to the line in Landerneau, which will be hosting a tour stage for the very first time. The entire opening stage will take place in the Finistère department. Stage 2 will start in Perros-Guirec, an elegant spa resort on the pink granite coast. The pictures, broadcast by France Télévisions, are sure to dazzle TV viewers around the world. June the 27th will be 100% Côte d'Armor. We will go through Saint-Brieuc before heading back inland, where the riders will scale the Mur de Bretagne twice. The first of 6 bonus points at the next tour will be awarded at the top of the first ascent, and those time bonuses could well be decisive in the fight for the yellow jersey. Cadel Evans became the first winner on the Mur de Bretagne in 2011 when he claimed a stage here and went on to win the Tour 2.5 weeks later. In 2015, it was the puncher from Jura, Alexis Villemot, who let his explosive legs do the talking. And most recently, Irishman Dan Martin took the spoils in 2018.
L'attaque de Dan Martin, il avait pris la 2e place il y a 3 ans. Attaque de l'Irlandais Dan Martin, attention lui, il a un coup de rein phénoménal. La victoire pour Dan Martin.
This grueling circuit will also host the 8th edition of La Course by la Tour de France with FDJ, where the titans of women's cycling will go head-to-head. There'll be a fantastic atmosphere on the Mur de Bretagne, which is also known as l'Alpe d'Huez of Brittany. On August the 29th, Lizzie Deignan became the first British winner of the race in Nice, the former world champion overhauling the reigning world champion Marianne Vos just before the line. It's been a superb season for Deignan, who also won Liège-Bastogne-Liège at the start of this month. Lorient is always a welcome stopover for the Tour and hosts the start of Stage 3 a few weeks before celebrating the 50th anniversary of its Inter-Celtic Festival. The riders will travel south to Quiberon Bay and stay on the roads of the Morbihan department all day long. In Plumelec, they will go over the famous Côte de Cadoudal, one of 2 categorised climbs on the day. This time around, stage honours should go to a sprinter, a pure sprinter, on the magnificent home straight into Pontivy. After Landerneau on stage 1, this will be a Tour debut for Pontivy, the birthplace of the UCI president, David Lapartien. Redon, a little town of great renown, will be back on the Tour on June the 29th, a decade after discovering the race under sunny skies in 2011. Back then, it hosted a stage finish. It will be a short stage held entirely in the only department of Brittany that the Tour has yet to visit, Ille-et-Vilaine. This 4th stage will take us through the pretty town of Vitré, and like on the previous day, a sprinter should come out on top in Fougères, home of the bulldog of Fougères, Albert Bouvet, a former rider and head of the Tour's sports department until the 1990s. After 4 stages and over 700 kilometres, we will leave Brittany and the Château de Fougères, the largest medieval fortress in Europe, returning to Mayenne after 22 years. The riders will set out from Changé for the first individual time trial, a 27-kilometre race against the clock on stage 5 with 2 intermediate time checks. The last time that the first week of the Tour de France had such a long individual time trial was in 2008, and it will no doubt cause an early shake-up in the general classification.
Ce jour-là, à Laval, les favoris feront leur compte.
Ambassadors from the Mécénat Chirurgie Cardiaque will come together in Mayenne next year. 21 children have undergone life-saving heart surgery this year, bringing the total to 321 since the non-profit organisation began its partnership with the Tour in 2003. We were in Tours fewer than 3 weeks ago for the end of Paris Tour, a race that will lend its roads to the Tour de France for the first part of Stage 6. The riders will cross the Loire in Amboise and admire the Château de Chenonceau, a jewel of Renaissance architecture on the banks of the Cher. The favourites and their teammates will have to stay on high alert in the Indre department. The last 75 kilometres are prime territory for echelons, in particular the final 20k before the finish in Châteauroux. The 1,600-metre home straight is tailored to the fast men. The only question is whether we'll see a bunch sprint or a reduced group sprint. In 2008, Mark Cavendish claimed the first of his 30 Tour de France stage wins in Châteauroux. He went on to raise his arms in 26 different towns and cities, including 4 times in Paris and twice in Châteauroux itself. You wanted to see Vierzon, sang Jacques Brel. Well, we've seen Vierzon in Paris-Nice and the Tour de l'Avenir, but this is going to be a first in the Tour. At 248 kilometres, Stage 7 is the longest of next year's edition, and in fact the longest Tour de France stage of the past 20 years. It will be 100 kilometres longer than the previous stage, and the second half, starting in Château-Chinon, will be extremely demanding. It's littered with climbs, including a leg breaker in the Saône-et-Loire department. The riders will discover the granite formations of a summit that is known as the Pearl of Morvan, the Signal du Champ.
Découvriront le Signal du Champ.
After overcoming the Signal du Champ and its maximum gradients of 18%, the peloton will be 20 kilometres from the finish line in Le Creusot. A beautiful home straight awaits in a town that last hosted the Tour de France 15 years ago. The altitude gain of 3,300 metres, including 2,000 in the first 100k, should encourage the breakaway hopefuls. Oyonnax hosts its second Tour de France stage 7 years after Tony Galopin took victory there. We will travel the roads of the Ain and Haute-Savoie departments, leaving the Jura Massif and heading for the Alps. The main difficulties will be packed into the second part of Stage 8 with a tantalising but very tough trio. First, a steep, narrow climb, 5.3 kilometres at 8.9%, will lead the peloton to Mont-Saxonnet, located at the foot of the ascent to the Plateau de Solaizan. Next up will be the succession of the Col de Rome, almost 9 kilometres at almost 9%, and the Col de la Colombière, 7.5 kilometres at 8.5%. The riders will then dive into the descent and discover the 200-year-old chalets of Le Grand Bornand. All in all, there will be over 20 kilometres worth of climbing at an average gradient of 9% in the final third of the stage alone. Le Grand Bornand is where the current owner of the rainbow jersey, world champion Julian Alaphilippe, conquered his very first Tour de France stage win. That was just over 2 years ago, and we used the same final that day with the gruelling slog over Rome and Colombière. The last time we came here was almost 20 years ago in 2002. Cluse is back in the Tour. Only a few days after the Grand Départ in Brittany, the Côte de Domoncy will stir up memories of Bernard Hinault winning the World Championship road race in nearby Sallanches in 1980. The riders will then tackle the Col de Cézy. Next up is a formidable climb which made its Tour debut in 2018, the leg-breaking Col du Pré, which, after a short descent, connects with the majestic Cormet de Roseland. The peloton will then plunge towards the Tarentaise Valley before a final climb which will take us to an altitude of over 2,000 metres. Because, as we promised last year, after the cancellation of the stage, we are returning to Tignes, which I'm sure will get its stage finish this time around. Cluse-Tetignes, 5 categorised climbs for a total elevation gain of 4,400 metres. You won't have forgotten these pictures of winter coming early last year. This was July the 26th. Gros Léon got his 15 minutes of fame. That's the road sweeper of the Vosges department and the Assembly of French departments, which travels ahead of the race convoy every day to clear the road.
Regardez la grêle qui s'est abattue là sur la route.
Oui, c'est à 22 km 500 de l'arrivée.
L'étape va être arrêtée, l'étape va être arrêtée.
The stage is being abandoned.
Ah, ça reprendra pas.
L'étape est finie, ça ne va pas reprendre. Hein.
To make the most of our return to Tignes, we will spend the first rest day there before heading back down the valley to Albertville. The Olympic city is usually a springboard towards the summits, but things will be very different this time around. After 3 days at altitude, the peloton will leave the mountains behind for a few days. The sprinters will start to work up an appetite as stage 10 rolls on through the departments of Savoie, Isère and Drôme. The domestique will once again be called upon to protect their leaders on the plains. The overall favourites will have to be wary in the Rhône Valley. Certain passages are exposed to the wind, especially in the last 20 kilometres before the finish in Valence. The last time we came here, in 2018, the 7-time green jersey winner, Peter Sagan, claimed one of his 12 Tour de France stage wins, triumphing ahead of Alexander Kristoff and Arnaud Démare. Two of the greatest painters of all time, Picasso and Braque, came here to paint in the summer of 1912. Sorgues will be hosting the tour for the first time. This 11th stage, held entirely within the Vaucluse department, will be dominated by the silhouette of the iconic Mont Ventoux. We will ride through Apt, which hosted a stage of Paris-Nice in the spring, just like Sorgues. The peloton will start to get to grips with the giant of Provence after coming through Sorgues. This is the longest and shallowest of the 3 ascents of the Mont Ventoux. There are still 1,910 metres to scale before descending to Malocène. The riders will loop around the bald mountain to Bédouin before coming back for seconds. This time on the traditional, emblematic side of the ascent, the summit of which will soon be reserved for pedestrians and cyclists only. How very fitting. The riders will then plunge back to the plains towards Malocène, which, just like Sorgues, will be making its Tour debut. So let's recap. 2 helpings of the Mont Ventoux with the Col de la Liguière as an appetizer, a total elevation gain of 4,500 metres, the most of any stage in this 2021 edition. Like the Tour, the Ventoux witnessed its fair share of passion, tears, exploits and drama. Let's look back on over 50 years of emotions.
Nous sommes à 3 km du sommet du Mont Ventoux et nous arrivons à la hauteur de Tom Simpson qui titube sur la route. Il est affalé sur sa machine, incapable d'une réaction, d'un geste.
Eddy Merckx vient de passer devant cette stèle à la mémoire de Tom Simpson. Le maillot jaune au sommet du Mont Ventoux, on ne pouvait pas rêver mieux.
Il y a un démarrage là en tête de la course, il s'agit d'un démarrage de Thévenet qui est revenu comme une fusée qui a passé les 6 hommes en injection. À l'aise Thévenet, vous le voyez, il a monté à son main, j'ai l'impression même qu'il n'a pas forcé les hommes français car il arrive décontracté, top pour Thévenet.
Nette victoire, très nette victoire de Jean-François Bernard. Magnifique vainqueur de ce Ventoux.
Imágenes increíbles. Christopher Froome à Pierre, c'est une image absolument inédite, incroyable. Pointed to his bike, he needs a bike.
The day after the Mont Ventoux, we will revisit the Provence-style streets and alleys of Saint-Paul-Trois-Châteaux for the start of stage 12. The riders will roll past the breathtaking Ardèche Gorges, rising 200 metres above the riverbed for almost the entirety of the scenic route to Vallon-Pont-d'Arc. We will then veer south, and in the second part of the stage, the wind may come out to play in the Grand Départ, especially before Uzès, which is less than 30 kilometres from the finish line. The final, leading into Nîmes, will be exactly the same as in 2019. Australian sprinter Caleb Ewan, nicknamed the Pocket Rocket, took the spoils on our last visit.
Van Wegen qui est enfermé pour l'instant. Viviani qui lance son sprint le long des barrières. Viviani est en tête, mais c'est Caleb Ewan qui remonte. Caleb Ewan est très fort. Caleb Ewan s'impose.
Il était court ce sprint. C'est parti vraiment de tout près de la ligne.
Last year, Nîmes hosted the Atelier du Tour, workshops designed to introduce children to cycling. 1,700 boys and girls learned how to take care of their bikes, for example, as well as receiving safety tips.
Des consignes de sécurité.
We will leave Nîmes and the famous arenas of the majestic Roman city, heading due west for a stage that will give the sprinters another shot at glory. It's going to be long, 220 kilometres in total, which is about 30 kilometres more than 15 years ago when we took the same route in the opposite direction. The reason for the switch is to avoid road furniture, following the advice of former riders led by Thierry Gouvenou, for whom safety is a priority.
Essayez d'éviter au maximum.
The citadel and the ramparts of Carcassonne will provide an exceptional backdrop to the stage finish. The medieval city has been listed as a UNESCO World Heritage Site since 1997. From Carcassonne, the riders will prepare for another assault on the mountains, and we can expect to see plenty of breakaway attempts on the way to the Pyrenees. The peloton will crisscross the roads of the Aude and the Ariège departments. After Lavelanet, the riders will climb to the highest of the Cathar castles, Montségur, perched on its rocky peak. It's one of the 7 vertigo citadels, followed by the Col de la Croix des Morts. The stage will go to a baroudeur who's not afraid of the mountains, on roads that are rarely taken by the Tour. There's an all-new climb just 20 kilometres from the finish, which should play a decisive role in the fight for the stage win. That is the Col de Saint-Louis. The riders will then descend towards Quillan, home of the oldest criterium in France, which will feature on the Tour for the first time. The criterium was first held in 1938. Stage 15 will start in Céret, the birthplace of the 5-time Olympic gold medalist Martin Fourcade. It'll be the first town in the Pyrénées-Orientales department to host the race since 2009. The peloton will make its way through Prades, where Prime Minister Jean Castex served as mayor until earlier this year. In the heart of the Catalan Pyrenees, the riders will head towards Montlouis and its citadel, listed as a UNESCO World Heritage Site as part of the Vauban network. Slowly but surely, we will continue to gain altitude, going over the Col du Puy-Moras before reaching the highest point of the Tour 2021, the Port de Envalira, at 2,408 metres. Further down the road in Andorra, the steep Col de Bexalis will give the leaders a chance to showcase their climbing abilities before reaching Andorra la Vella, which also welcomed the finish of the first stage held in the Principality in 1964. The Tour has since returned to Andorra several times, most recently in 2016 when Tom Dumoulin survived a violent hailstorm to win at Arcalis. Many professional riders are based in Andorra, where we'll spend the second rest day in the sunshine before leaving the Principality via El Pas de la Casa on stage 16. El Pas de la Casa will be one of 10 all-new stage towns on next year's Tour. We will return to France but stay in the Pyrenees. On a bumpy parcours, there will be plenty of contenders for victory, though it should favour riders hunting stage wins rather than the overall favourites. The Col de Port will be the first major obstacle. The day's climbs won't discourage the baroudeur and the breakaway specialists. On the contrary, fortune could well favour the brave. Next up is the Col de la Cour. We'll then leave Ariège for Haute-Garonne via the much steeper gradients of the Col du Portet d'Aspet.
De la montée du Portet d'Aspet.
20 kilometres later, for the first time in over 20 years, we will finish in Saint-Gaudens. The finish line will be located in front of the grandstands of the old motor racing Grand Prix circuit. And it was here in 1959 that the sprint king André Darrigade claimed the first and only mountain stage win of his career. That was a few weeks before putting on the world champion's jersey. On stage 17, we will set out from Muret, which is hosting the Tour for the second time after 2015. The first part of the stage will be held on the plain, where a breakaway should go fairly early before a high-altitude, high-stakes duel for the Tour de France favourites. A Bastille Day battle on France's national holiday, July the 14th. There's a real sting in the tail on a stage that is almost identical to the Queen stage of the 2018 edition. 3 big climbs in the space of just 60 kilometres, the Col de Péresaude via Loudonvielle, the punishing Col de Val-Laurent-Azé, and the final climb after Saint-Lary-Soulan, the new giant of the Hautes-Pyrénées, which we discovered 2 years ago, 16 kilometres at an average gradient of 8.7%, the Col du Portet, 2,215 metres, that's 100 metres higher than the fabled Tourmalet. For the time being, Nairo Quintana is the only winner. You say Pau, I say Tour de France. The city will host the Tour for the 73rd time next summer. Stage 18 will give the yellow jersey contenders the opportunity to turn the race on its head in the final mountain showdown of this edition. After a flat start, the champions will be able to attack each other to their heart's content on a short stage of just 130 kilometres. The Tourmalet will be back on the menu, as the Tour de France can't go without it for too long. At the bottom of the descent, it'll be time to embark on the final ascent of this Tour, an elevation gain of over 1,000 metres before reaching Les Ardennes after a 13-kilometre climb. It'll be the Tour's first visit to the Hautes-Pyrénées resort in 10 years. Back then, stage honours went to Samuel Sanchez, the reigning Olympic champion, while Thomas Vauclair mounted a gallant defence of his overall deed with the invaluable aid of Pierre Rolland.
Qui en termine et qui sauve son maillot jaune presque sans souci. Regardez tout de suite la poignée de main à un remarquable, éblouissant Pierre Rolland.
The name of Merckx holds special significance for lovers of cycling history, who can never forget Eddy Merckx's phenomenal performance here in 1969. In Mont-de-Marsan, in France's rugby heartland, it was the Boniface brothers who left a lasting impression. This stage in the Landes will head from south to north and should appeal to the hardiest sprinters. The Tour will stop over in Libourne for the first time in almost 30 years. The last time we had a final time trial among the vineyards was in 2010. The top riders may start to smell the heady aroma of victory at the intermediate checkpoint in Pomerol on a stage that will titillate the taste buds of fine wine lovers everywhere. Hopefully we'll enjoy another clash of titans and perhaps even another stunning upset. Whether they approach the 31-kilometre course between Libourne and Saint-Emilion with hope or with fear, the riders will have one last opportunity to snatch the yellow jersey. From the banks of the Dordogne to the loops of the Seine, we'll be in Chatou on the Ile des Impressionnistes in the Yvelines, where Paris-Nice has been getting underway for a decade. The department will host the start of the Tour's final stage for the 4th consecutive year. Once we reach the capital, we will ride past the Senate and enjoy the magnificent passage in front of the Louvre, which has delighted the peloton over the past 2 years. We will head up the Champs-Élysées and the riders will swoop around the Arc de Triomphe on Place Charles de Gaulle, as they've been doing every year since 2013. It was one of the most striking and lasting innovations of the 100th edition. After 8 laps, it'll be time for the final sprint shootout before celebrating the winner of the Tour de France 2021. From Brest to the Champs-Élysées, the 108th edition of the Tour de France features 21 stages, totalling 3,383 kilometres in France and the Principality of Andorra. We will go higher than in the previous edition, reaching an altitude of 2,408 metres at the summit of the Port d'Envalira. In contrast, there will be fewer second, first or hors category climbs this year, 27 down from 29. 2020 was an all-time record in that regard. There will be 6 mountain stages and 3 summit finishes, Tignes, the Col de Porte above Saint-Lary-Soulan and Luz-Ardiden. The King of the Mountains points will be doubled for those 3 uphill finishes. 10 towns and cities will be hosting the tour for the first time. There will be 5 medium mountain stages, 8 flat stages and 2 individual time trials for the first time since 2017. The longest road stage will be twice as long as the shortest, 122 kilometres from Château to the Champs-Élysées, 248 from Vierzon to Le Creusot. The route will include 6 bonus points, awarding time bonuses which will be placed at the summit of climbs in strategic locations.
À des endroits stratégiques.
The tour is all about jerseys and classifications. The yellow jersey, of course, which has been sponsored by LCL since 1987 and was conquered by a Slovenian rider for the first time this year. The green jersey for the points classification has been sponsored by Skoda since 2015. Irishman Sam Bennett took it all the way to Paris for the first time. The polka dot jersey represents the mountains classification. That was also won by Tadej Pogačar, sponsored by Leclerc for the 3rd year in a row. The white jersey has been sponsored by Chris since 2015, and this year the best young rider was also the best rider full stop, that man Pogačar again. The same thing happened in 2019 when Egan Bernal doubled up in yellow and white. Continental will sponsor stage wins for the 3rd year in a row. For the 5th time in 6 years, Movistar claimed the team classification sponsored by Named Sport. Finally, the Antargaz Combativity Prize was awarded to young Swiss rider Mark Hirschi, who lit up the race with a stage win and his relentless attacks. And I'd like to thank all of our partners, whether they have joined us recently or stayed true to the tour for almost 40 years, like LCL. Le Crédit Lyonnais was part of the caravan before sponsoring the yellow jersey. Jean-Etienne Amaury has already spoken about our commitment to the environment. I would simply like to add that our Riding into the Future campaign, which promotes cycling for everyone and in all its forms, will continue throughout the Tour 2021. I didn't want to end my speech without mentioning l'étape du Tour. Year after year, more and more of you are eager to find out which stage we've chosen for you. The world's biggest cyclo-sportive was supposed to take place around Nice in early September on the course of Stage 2 of the Tour de France. It should have celebrated its 30th anniversary. L'étape du Tour brings together 16,000 competitors from around 60 different countries, a truly global peloton. The last edition was held 15 months ago at Val Thorens, a never-ending climb of over 30 kilometres to an altitude of 2,300 metres. The event always takes place on the course of the current edition, but due to current circumstances and as a one-off measure, we've decided that in 2021, l'Étape du Tour will be held on the planned route for 2020. That is to say, a big loop around Nice, featuring La Colmiane and the Col de Turini. I'd also like to send our thoughts to everyone who's been affected by the recent storms in the Alpes-Maritimes, our friends in Nice and the Nice Metropole, which were badly hit at the start of this month. Nice, which hosted the Grand Départ in 2020, is passing the torch to Brittany and to Brest for 2021. So we'll see you soon in Brittany and on the roads of France and Andorra, in a world that will hopefully have gone a bit, or even mostly, back to normal. Vive le Tour!